Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. The UES Defiant was not the prettiest ship in space, but it was his ship. Its gray metal hull was covered with thick armor plates. Heavy guns stuck out from its sides like the spines of an angry animal. Next to the other ships at Kepler Prime, it looked like a flying brick. "Sir, we're getting close to the station," said Lieutenant Amy Collins. She was his best engineer and had been with him for 3 years. Amy knew every bolt and wire on the Defiant. She also knew how the other aliens looked at their ship. "Thank you, Amy. Take us in nice and slow. I want everyone to see what humans can build." The Kepler Prime space station was huge. It floated in space like a silver city. Ships from all over the galaxy were docked there for the big show. The annual Galactic Naval Exhibition happened once every 5 years. Every major power in the galaxy sent their best ships to show off. Jake had never seen so many different types of ships in one place. The Zeltharian Empire had sent 3 of their crystal ships. These ships looked like they were made of living glass. They were smooth and beautiful. Light seemed to flow through their hulls like water. Their weapons were invisible until they fired. The Vorthan collective ships were even stranger. They seemed to fade in and out of reality. Sometimes Jake could see them clearly. Other times they looked like ghosts. The Vorthans had learned to travel between dimensions. Their ships could disappear from normal space and reappear anywhere they wanted. But the most impressive ships belonged to the ancient Kethmoran race. Their vessels looked like they were carved from solid starlight. They glowed with their own inner fire. The Kethmorans had been traveling space for over 10,000 years. Their technology was so advanced that other races could barely understand. It done there with the human ships. The Defiant docked next to a Zeltharian cruiser called the Eternal Grace. The difference was painful to see. The Grace was 3 times bigger than the Defiant, and looked like a work of art. Its crystal hull caught the light from Kepler's sun and threw rainbows across the docking bay. The Defiant looked like a gray box with guns taped to it. Amy saw Jake's face and knew what he was thinking. "Sir, our ships may not be pretty, but they work. We've never lost a fight." "I know, Amy, but sometimes I wonder if looking good is half the battle in politics." Admiral Peter Hayes was already at the station. He was Earth's representative to the Galactic Federation Council. Peter had been a soldier before he became a diplomat. He understood that respect had to be earned, not given. The exhibition hall was massive. Ships from dozens of different races were on display. Crowds of aliens walked between them, pointing and talking. Jake heard their voices in his translation earpiece. Most of the talk was about advanced technology and beautiful designs. Then the crowds reached the human section. The laughter started small. A few aliens chuckled when they saw the human ships. Then more joined in. Soon the entire hall was filled with the sound of alien laughter. Jake felt his face turn red with anger. Ambassador Zixtera of the Zeltharian Empire stood in front of the Defiant. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like blue crystal. Her voice carried across the hall when she spoke. "These human ships look like flying scrap heaps," she said loudly. "Are they held together with prayer and stubbornness?" More laughter filled the hall. Other ambassadors joined in the fun. "Do humans really fight wars with these things?" asked a Vorthan diplomat. "They look like they would fall apart if you looked at them too hard." "Perhaps humans have different ideas about what makes a good ship," said a Kethmoran elder. His voice was polite, but Jake could hear the amusement in it. Amy's hands were shaking with anger. She wanted to tell these aliens exactly what she thought of them, but Jake put a hand on her shoulder. "Easy, Amy. Let them laugh. Words are just air." Admiral Hayes stood with the other diplomats at the main viewing platform. His face showed nothing, but inside he was burning with shame. These aliens thought humans were a joke. They thought human ships were toys. They were wrong, but how could he prove it? The exhibition continued for 3 days. Each day brought new demonstrations of alien technology. The Zeltharians showed how their ships could heal themselves when damaged. The Vorthans made their ships invisible by shifting into other dimensions. The Kethmorans demonstrated weapons that could destroy asteroids with a single shot. When it was time for the humans to demonstrate their ships, they were given the oldest targets to shoot at, ancient hulks that had been used for target practice for years. The other races fought against each other in mock battles that looked like deadly dances in space. The message was clear. Humans were barely worth acknowledging. Their ships were primitive. Their weapons were crude. Their tactics were simple. In a galaxy full of advanced civilizations, humans were the new kids who didn't belong. On the last day of the exhibition, Jake stood in a bar near the docking bays. Amy was with him, along with several other human officers. They had all watched their ships be mocked for 3 days. "This isn't over," Jake said quietly. "Someday these aliens will see what human ships can really do." "When will that be, sir?" asked Amy. Jake looked out at the stars, through the bar's window. Somewhere out there, danger was coming. The galaxy was not as safe as these aliens thought. When that danger arrived, they would learn that pretty ships were not always the best ships. "Sooner than they think, Amy. Sooner than they think." The Defiant left Kepler Prime the next morning. As they pulled away from the station, Jake could see the alien ships still docked there. They looked like jewels floating in space, beautiful, advanced, and confident. But Jake had learned something important during the exhibition. The aliens had spent so much time making their ships beautiful that they had forgotten to make them tough. Human ships might not win any beauty contests, but they were built to survive. The galaxy would learn that lesson soon enough. When the real test came, it would not matter how pretty a ship looked. It would only matter how well it could fight. And human ships, ugly as they were, knew how to fight. 6 months had passed since the exhibition at Kepler Prime. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UES Defiant, reading reports from the Outer Rim colonies. The news was not good. Ships were disappearing. Entire colonies had gone silent. Something was attacking the edge of known space. "Sir, we're getting a priority message from Fleet Command," said Lieutenant Amy Collins. She had been promoted after their return from Kepler Prime, but she still preferred to work with her hands in the engine room. "Put it on screen, Amy." Admiral Peter Hayes appeared on the main display. He looked tired and worried. Behind him, Jake could see other officers running around with urgent reports. "Jake, we have a situation. The Outer Rim is under attack by something new. They call themselves the Ravagers. These things eat entire star systems. The Galactic Federation is putting together a fleet to stop them. What do they need from us, sir?" "Supply runs and evacuation duty. The big powers don't think human ships can handle real combat against this threat." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Even now, even with colonies dying, the aliens still thought humans were worthless in a fight. "We'll do our duty, Admiral. But if the chance comes to prove ourselves, we'll take it." "I was hoping you'd say that. Be careful out there, Jake. These Ravagers are not like anything we've faced before." The transmission ended. Jake stared at the blank screen for a moment. Then he turned to Amy. "Set course for the Sigma Draconis system, and send a message to Commander Lisa Park on the Ranger. Tell her to follow us." Amy looked surprised. "Sir, our orders are to help with evacuations. Sigma Draconis is where the main fleet is going to fight." "I know exactly where it is, Lieutenant. Sometimes orders and duty don't point in the same direction." The UES Ranger was Jake's sister ship. Commander Lisa Park had been his friend since their academy days. Like Jake, she commanded a ship that the aliens thought was worthless. Like Jake, she was tired of being treated like a second-class citizen in the galaxy. The journey to Sigma Draconis took 2 days. During that time, Jake studied everything Fleet Command knew about the Ravagers. They were machines, but not like any machines humans had ever seen. They could adapt to any weapon used against them. Their ships healed themselves. They consumed everything in their path and used it to build more ships. "Captain, we're picking up distress signals from the battle zone," reported Amy. "It sounds bad, sir." Jake moved to the sensor station. The readings were terrible. The Federation fleet was being torn apart. Ships that had looked so beautiful and advanced at Kepler Prime were dying in space. "There," Jake pointed at the main screen. "The Eternal Radiance. That's High Counselor Veltar's flagship." The massive Zeltharian ship was surrounded by Ravager vessels. Its crystal hull was cracked and bleeding light into space. The same ship that had looked so perfect 6 months ago was now fighting for its life. "Sir, the Ravagers have some kind of adaptive shielding," Amy reported. "Every time the Federation ships hit them with energy weapons, the shields learn how to stop that type of attack." Jake smiled grimly. "Good thing we don't use energy weapons." The Defiant and Ranger dropped out of hyperspace right in the middle of the battle. Jake had never seen anything like it. Space was full of explosions and debris. Ships that had taken centuries to build were being destroyed in minutes. "Amy, load all missile tubes with conventional warheads. Nothing fancy, nothing exotic, just good old-fashioned explosives." "Sir, conventional weapons won't do much damage to ships that size." "We'll see about that." "Lisa, you reading this?" Commander Park's voice came over the radio. "Copy that, Jake. My missiles are loaded and ready. Let's show these metal bugs what humans can do." The 2 human ships charged into the battle. They were tiny compared to the massive Ravager vessels, but they were fast and hard to hit. Jake aimed for the Ravagers attacking the Eternal Radiance. "Fire all tubes." Dozens of missiles streaked out from the Defiant. They were simple, crude weapons compared to the exotic energy beams the other races used, but they worked. The Ravager ships had learned to defend against energy weapons. They had not learned to defend against simple explosives. The first Ravager ship shuddered as human missiles punched through its hull. Then the second ship took damage. Then the third. For the first time in the battle, the Ravagers were being hurt. "Lisa, concentrate fire on the big one. I'll take the 2 smaller ships." "Roger that. These things don't know what hit them." High Counselor Veltar watched from his damaged bridge as 2 primitive human ships saved his life. The same ships he had mocked at Kepler Prime were now fighting better than his advanced crystal vessels. But the battle was far from over. More Ravager ships were coming. The human ships were taking damage. The Defiant's armor was cracked in bleeding air. The Ranger had lost half its missile tubes. "Sir, we can't keep this up much longer," Amy said. Her board was covered with red warning lights. "We don't have to keep it up forever. Just long enough for the Federation ships to retreat." Jake was right. The surviving alien ships were pulling back. The Eternal Radiance's engines came back online, and it began to move away from the battle. Other ships followed. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Fall back to safe distance. We've done what we can here." "Admiral Morrison?" Amy looked confused. "That's Admiral Hayes. He must be watching the battle from Fleet Command." The retreat was messy and dangerous. Ravager ships chased the Federation fleet for hours, but the human ships stayed behind, using their missiles to slow down the pursuit. By the time they reached safe space, both the Defiant and Ranger were barely holding together. The court-martial happened 3 days later. Jake and Lisa stood before a panel of Federation officers. They were charged with disobeying orders and risking their ships without permission. "Captain Morrison," said the lead judge, a stern Vorthan admiral, "you were ordered to assist with evacuations. Instead, you entered combat without authorization. How do you plead?" "Guilty, sir. But I would do it again." "And why is that, Captain?" Jake looked at the panel of alien officers. Some of them had been at Kepler Prime. Some of them had laughed at human ships, because sometimes doing what's right is more important than following orders. Those ships needed help. We were the only ones who could give it. The court found them guilty and sentenced them to formal reprimands. But as Jake and Lisa left the courtroom, High Counselor Veltar was waiting for them. Captain Morrison, Commander Park. The tall Zeltharian bowed his head slightly. I owe you my life. My ship and my crew owe you their lives. We were just doing our job, sir. No, Captain. You were doing much more than that. Veltar looked at the two human officers with new respect. I misjudged your ships. I misjudged your people. I will not make that mistake again. As the Zeltharian leader walked away, Amy joined Jake in the corridor. Sir, do you think this changes anything? Jake watched Veltar disappear around a corner. The proud alien who had mocked human ships was now walking differently. He looked like someone who had learned an important lesson. Maybe Amy, maybe it does. But Jake knew the real test was still coming. The Ravagers were still out there, still eating their way through the galaxy. The Federation had lost badly in their first real battle. Pretty ships and advanced technology had not been enough. The galaxy was going to need something different to win this war. Something tough and reliable and stubborn. Something that could take damage and keep fighting. Something like human ships. The aliens were starting to understand that. Soon, they would understand it completely. The Ravagers did not stop. Every week brought news of another system lost, another colony consumed. The beautiful ships of the galaxy's great powers kept losing battles. Their advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that could adapt to any weapon. Fleet Admiral Susan Blake stood in the command center on Earth, watching the holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots showed where the Ravagers had attacked. There were too many red dots now. Admiral, the Galactic Council is calling, said her aide. Susan had been expecting this call. For months, the aliens had tried to fight the Ravagers their way. Energy weapons, exotic shields, advanced tactics. Nothing worked. Now, they were desperate enough to ask humans for help. The council meeting was held over subspace communication. Representatives from dozens of worlds appeared as holograms around a virtual table. Susan recognized many faces from the exhibition at Kepler Prime. They looked scared now. Admiral Blake, said the council leader, an ancient Keth Morin. The situation has become critical. We need new approaches to this threat. What exactly are you asking for? Susan kept her voice neutral. We want to give you command of a joint task force. Human and alien ships working together. Susan almost smiled. 6 months ago, these same aliens had laughed at human ships. Now they wanted human leadership. I'll need complete tactical control. No interference from your military leaders. Agreed. What do you need? Time to prepare, and access to captured Ravager technology. If we're going to beat these things, we need to understand them. Dr. Marcus Webb was already working on that problem. In a secret laboratory under the Colorado mountains, he studied pieces of destroyed Ravager ships. What he found was disturbing. They're not just machines, he told Susan during her visit to the lab. They were organic once. Someone uploaded their minds into mechanical bodies. That's why they're so adaptable. They think like living beings, but they have the advantages of machines. Can we use that against them? Maybe. I'm working on something. Give me a few more weeks. While Dr. Webb worked in his lab, Captain Ryan Cooper prepared for his first combat mission. He commanded the UES Vanguard, the newest ship in the human fleet. It looked like other human ships, ugly, armored, practical. But inside, it carried new weapons designed by engineer Kate Miller. Kate had spent months studying how the Ravagers adapted to different attacks. She had developed what she called dumb smart missiles. They looked like simple explosives on the outside, but hidden inside each one was a sophisticated computer that could change tactics in mid-flight. The idea is to fool their sensors, Kate explained to Ryan. They'll see a primitive missile coming and ignore it. By the time they realize what it really is, it'll be too late. Ryan's first test came at the Tau Ceti system. Ravager scouts had been spotted there, probably looking for new worlds to consume. Ryan took the Vanguard in alone, supported by 2 older human cruisers. The battle was short but intense. The Ravagers tried to adapt to Ryan's weapons, but the missiles kept changing their approach. Some flew in straight lines, like dumb projectiles. Others twisted through space, like smart weapons. The Ravagers couldn't figure out what they were. Fighting. Target destroyed, reported Ryan's weapons officer. Enemy scouts eliminated. It was a small victory, but an important one. For the first time, humans had won a clean fight against the Ravagers. The news reached High Counselor Veltar as he prepared his home fleet for evacuation. The Ravagers were coming for the Zeltharian core worlds. His beautiful crystal ships were no match for the metal monsters, but he had to try. Then Admiral Blake's message arrived. "Counselor, I'm offering joint tactical command of your defense. Human ships and Zeltharian ships working together." Veltar S. Pride wanted to refuse. He was the leader of an ancient, advanced civilization. How could he take orders from primitives? But his wisdom won the argument. Pride was a luxury he could not afford when his people were dying. "I accept your offer, Admiral. What are your orders?" "Prepare your ships to follow human tactical doctrine, and be ready to take some risks." The defense of the Zeltharian home system was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Blake mixed human and alien ships into combined squadrons. The humans provided firepower and toughness. The aliens provided speed and advanced sensors. But the most important part of the battle happened in space between the stars. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a small fleet of modified ships, attacked a Ravager supply convoy. Using boarding tactics that no other species had even considered, human Marines captured an intact Ravager command ship. "We've got it," Jake reported to Admiral Blake. "One intact command vessel, complete with navigation data." Dr. Webb nearly jumped with excitement when he saw the captured ship. Inside its memory banks was the location of the Ravager's central hub, a massive construction in the galaxy's core where they built their fleets. "This is it," he told Admiral Blake. "This is where they all come from. If we can destroy this hub, we can stop them." Admiral Blake studied the data. The hub was protected by thousands of Ravager ships. It was surrounded by dangerous stellar phenomena. Getting there would be almost impossible. Fighting there would be suicide. "How many ships would we need?" she asked. "All of them," said Dr. Webb. "Every ship in the galaxy that can still fight." The call went out across known space. Every surviving civilization was asked to contribute to one final battle. The response was overwhelming. Even species that had never worked together before agreed to follow. Human Tactical Command. High Counselor Veltar stood on the bridge of his rebuilt flagship, watching human engineers install new weapon systems. His beautiful crystal ship now bristled with crude human armor and ugly missile launchers. It looked terrible, but he knew it would fight better than ever before. "Admiral Blake," he said over the communication channel, "my fleet is ready." "Thank you, Counselor. Are you sure about this? Your ships will be in the front line of the assault." "Admiral, 6 months ago I mocked your ships because they were ugly. I have learned that beauty means nothing in war. Only effectiveness matters." Captain Ryan Cooper prepared the Vanguard for the longest journey of his career. The trip to the galactic core would take weeks. Engineer Kate Miller had loaded his ship with every type of weapon she could design. Some were crude missiles. Others were sophisticated bombs. All of them were designed to fool Ravager adaptive systems. "Ryan," Admiral Blake said during their final briefing, "your job is to get close to that hub and plant charges in its main power core. If you succeed, the explosion will destroy their entire fleet construction facility. And if I fail, then we all die trying. But I don't think you'll fail. Human ships have surprised me before. I think they'll surprise me again." Captain Morrison gathered his boarding teams for their mission briefing. They would have to fight their way into the most heavily defended structure in the galaxy. Many of them would not come back. Men and women, he said to the assembled Marines. The aliens used to laugh at us. They thought we were primitive. They thought our ships were ugly and our weapons were crude. They were right about all of that. But they forgot something important. Morrison looked at each face in the room. These were soldiers who had been ignored and dismissed by the galaxy's great powers. Now everything depended on them. They forgot that sometimes primitive works better than advanced. Sometimes ugly wins fights that beautiful loses. Sometimes crude gets the job done when sophisticated fails. The Marines cheered. They knew they were about to face impossible odds. They knew most of them would die, but they also knew they would prove once and for all that humans belonged in the galaxy. The great fleet began to move toward the galactic core, thousands of ships from dozens of different worlds, all following plans made by human commanders. The species that had once mocked humanity now trusted human leadership completely. The Ravagers were waiting for them. The central hub was surrounded by more enemy ships than anyone had ever seen in one place. The battle would be the largest in galactic history. But the humans had learned something important during their months of fighting. The Ravagers adapted to advanced technology, but they had trouble with simple approaches. They expected sophisticated tactics, not straightforward attacks. They prepared for elegant solutions, not brutal ones. Human tactics were not elegant. They were not sophisticated. They were simple, direct, and devastating. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between looking good and being effective. The journey to the galactic core was the longest 3 weeks of Admiral Tony Richards' life. He commanded the stealth assault fleet, 20 human ships modified for silent running. Their hulls were covered with special materials that absorbed sensor waves. Their engines ran cold and quiet. Even their life support systems had been muffled. "Admiral, we're passing through the Magellan Nebula," reported Lieutenant Commander Beth Stone. She was the fleet's electronic warfare specialist. Her job was to keep them invisible to Ravager sensors. "Any contacts?" "3 Ravager patrol ships, but they're not looking in our direction. The nebula is hiding our heat signatures." Tony nodded. For 3 weeks, they had been sneaking through the most dangerous part of the galaxy. The stellar nurseries near the galactic core were full of young stars, radiation storms, and gravitational anomalies. Most ships avoided this area completely. That was exactly why Admiral Blake had chosen it for their approach route. The stealth fleet was made up of volunteers. Every captain knew this was a one-way mission. Their job was to get close to the Ravager central hub and disable its defenses. If they succeeded, the main fleet would have a chance to attack. If they failed, everyone would die. Captain Greg Nelson checked his equipment one more time. He commanded the Marine boarding teams that would assault the hub directly. His soldiers were loaded into modified cargo ships that looked like space junk from the outside. Hidden inside were the best fighters humanity had ever trained. "Remember," Greg told his squad leaders over a private channel, "we're not trying to capture this thing. We just need to plant our charges and get out. Speed is everything." The charges were Dr. Marcus Webb's latest creation. Each one was designed to look like a piece of broken machinery, but inside was enough explosive power to crack a moon. If the Marines could plant them in the right places, the hub's main power core would overload and destroy the entire structure. "Sir, we're getting close to the target zone," Beth reported. "Ravager activity is increasing." Tony moved to the sensor station. The screens showed hundreds of enemy ships around the central hub. The hub itself was massive, a dark metal sphere the size of a small planet. Smaller structures covered its surface like mechanical growths. "That thing is bigger than our intelligence," reports suggested. Tony muttered. "Sir, I'm detecting construction activity. They're building new ships inside those surface structures." Tony felt his stomach turn cold. The Ravagers weren't just defending this place. They were using it to build more of themselves. Every day the war continued. The enemy got stronger. Beth, how long until the main fleet arrives? 18 hours, sir. Then we have 18 hours to shut this thing down. All ships, prepare for final approach. Silent running protocols are now in effect. The stealth fleet spread out and began the delicate process of getting close to the hub. Each ship had to avoid dozens of patrol routes while staying hidden in the sensor shadows of asteroids and debris fields. Tony's flagship, the UES Shadow, was a modified human cruiser that looked like it had been through a dozen battles. Its armor was scarred and dented. Its weapons were hidden behind fake damage. To Ravager sensors, it looked like floating wreckage. Sir, we're picking up communication signals from inside the hub, Beth reported. The computers are trying to translate, but it's not like anything we've heard before. Can you make any sense of it? It's not really language, sir. It's more like ... singing. Or maybe screaming. The signals are coming from the deepest parts of the hub. Tony felt a chill run down his spine. Dr. Webb had discovered that the Ravagers were once organic beings who had uploaded their minds into machines. What had that process done to them? What was left of their original personalities? Keep monitoring those signals. If they change pattern, I want to know immediately. Captain Nelson's Marines were already preparing for their assault. They had studied every piece of intelligence about the hub's interior structure. The power core was buried deep inside, protected by layers of armor and automated defenses. Sergeant Martinez, take your team through the maintenance tunnels. Corporal Johnson, you're going through the main corridors. I'll lead the assault on the central chamber. Sir, Sergeant Martinez asked, what if we run into defenders inside? Then we fight our way through. These things may be machines, but they can still be destroyed. Remember your training. The Marines had trained for months in mock-ups of Ravager ship interiors. They knew how to fight in zero gravity, how to cut through mechanical armor, and how to plant explosives under fire. But this would be their first real test against the enemy. All boarding teams, this is Admiral Richards. You are go for assault. Good luck. The cargo ships that carried the Marines looked like they were drifting randomly toward the hub. Their engines were cold, their life signs hidden to any watching sensors. They appeared to be debris from some ancient battle, but as they got close to the hub's surface, the deception became harder to maintain. Ravager defensive systems were sophisticated. They could detect even the smallest signs of life or mechanical activity. Sir, we're being scanned, reported Beth. The hub's main sensors are focusing on our position. Can you spoof them? I'm trying, but their scanning patterns are adapting. They're learning to see through our stealth systems. This was the moment Tony had been dreading. The Ravager's ability to adapt was their greatest weapon. Even human stealth technology would eventually fail against them. All ships, prepare for emergency acceleration. If they spot us, we'll have to fight our way in. The scanning continued for several long minutes. Tony watched the sensor displays, knowing that discovery meant certain death. The stealth fleet was outnumbered 1,000 to 1. If the Ravagers found them now, the mission would fail before it began. Then the scanning stopped. Sir, I think we're clear. The sensors are moving on to other targets. Tony let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Good work, Beth. Continue the approach. The Marine assault ships reached the hub surface without being detected. Captain Nelson led his teams through maintenance hatches that had been left open by accident or design. The interior of the hub was like a mechanical nightmare, endless corridors filled with pipes, cables, and strange machinery. This place is huge, Nelson reported over his radio. The corridors go on forever. It's like being inside a giant machine. The Marines split up and began working their way toward the power core. They moved quickly and quietly, avoiding the mechanical creatures that served as the hub's internal security. These defenders were not fully intelligent like the Ravagers. but they were dangerous enough. Sergeant Martinez here. I've reached the first target point. Planting charges now. Corporal Johnson reporting. Second target secured. These charges are going to make a big boom. Nelson reached the central chamber and found something unexpected. The power core was not just a machine, it was organic as well. Cables and circuits were mixed with what looked like living tissue. The whole structure pulsed like a giant heart. Admiral Richards, this is Nelson. You need to see this. I'm sending video. Tony watched Nelson's camera feed in horror. The power core was not just powering the hub's machinery, it was feeding something alive inside the structure. The Ravagers had not just uploaded their minds into machines. They had created a hybrid of flesh and metal that was neither fully organic nor fully mechanical. Plant the charges anyway, Captain. We have to destroy this thing. Nelson placed his explosives around the core chamber. The charges looked like broken pipes or damaged circuits. Even if the Ravagers found them, they might not recognize them as weapons until it was too late. All teams, report in. Are the charges set? Martinez here. Charges planted and armed. Johnson reporting. Ready to blow on your signal. Nelson here. Central charges are in place. We need to get out of here now. But as the Marines tried to retreat, the hub's defenses finally detected them. Alarms began blaring throughout the structure. Mechanical guards poured into the corridors. The Ravagers knew they were under attack. All teams, fight your way out. Don't let them stop you from reaching the extraction points. The battle inside the hub was fierce but brief. Human Marines fought mechanical defenders in narrow corridors and zero-gravity chambers. The humans were outnumbered, but they were better, trained and more determined. Nelson's team was the last to reach safety. As their ship pulled away from the hub, he activated the detonation sequence. All charges are armed and ready. We're clear of the blast zone. Tony watched the extraction ships dock with his fleet. They had lost 6 Marines, but the mission was complete. The charges were in place and ready to detonate. Beth signaled the main fleet. Tell Admiral Blake we're in position. Sir, what about those communication signals we detected earlier? They're getting stronger. Tony looked at the sensor readings. The strange singing or screaming from inside the hub was getting louder. Whatever was in there, it knew the charges had been planted. It knew its time was running out. It doesn't matter now. We've done our job. When the main fleet arrives, we'll blow this thing and end the war. But even as he said it, Tony wondered what they were really destroying. The Ravagers had once been a living species. They had uploaded their minds to escape death, but had they escaped into something worse than death? The main Federation fleet was 18 hours away. When they arrived, the final battle for the galaxy would begin. But first, Tony's stealth ships had to survive until then. The hub's defenses were fully active now. Thousands of Ravager ships were searching for the intruders. The stealth fleet was hidden among asteroids and debris, but their hiding places would not protect them forever. All ships, prepare for a long wait, and pray that our charges work when the time comes. The galaxy's fate now depended on simple human explosives hidden inside an alien machine god. Sometimes the most primitive solutions were the most effective. Once, the final battle began at dawn on Earth, though dawn meant nothing in the depths of space near the galactic core. President Maria Rodriguez watched from the White House. Situation Room, as humanity's greatest gamble, unfolded millions of miles away. Madam President, Admiral Blake is reporting that all fleets are in position, said her military aide. Maria nodded, but did not speak. Every human ship in space was part of this attack. If they failed, Earth would be defenseless. If they succeeded, humanity would have saved the galaxy. There was no middle ground in space around the Ravager's central hub. The largest fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. Ships from every surviving civilization floated in formation. Zeltharian crystal vessels gleamed next to human metal boxes. Vorthon phase ships flickered in and out of reality. Ancient Kethmoran starlight cruisers pulsed with inner fire. Admiral Jake Morrison, now commanding the entire human battle fleet, looked out at the massive enemy force surrounding the hub. There were so many Ravager ships that they blocked out the stars. Each one was perfectly adapted for war. Each one had learned from every battle the Federation had lost. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Remember, we're not trying to win a pretty fight. We're trying to get our people close enough to that hub to finish the job. Stay ugly, stay simple, and stay alive. The attack began with a massive frontal assault. Zeltharian crystal ships led the charge, their beautiful hulls gleaming as they fired their exotic weapons. The Ravagers responded immediately. They're adaptive, shields learning to counter each new type of attack. But this time, the Federation was ready for that adaptation. Hidden among the fancy alien ships were human vessels, loaded with primitive kinetic weapons. Every time the Ravagers adapted to energy beams, they got hit with simple missiles. Every time they learned to stop missiles, they got hammered with rail gun slugs. They can't adapt fast enough, reported Commander Alex Turner from his position on Morrison's flagship. The mixed attack patterns are confusing their systems. High Counselor Veltar watched the battle from the bridge of his rebuilt crystal ship. 6 months ago, he would have been horrified to see his beautiful vessel covered with ugly human armor and crude weapons. Now he was grateful for every piece of primitive equipment. Human ships are breaking through on the left flank, his tactical officer reported. Support them with everything we have. Today, we fight as humans fight. Captain Ryan Cooper pushed the UES Vanguard deeper into the battle. His ship was surrounded by Ravager vessels, but Engineer Kate Miller's mixed weapon systems kept them confused. Every missile looked different. Every attack used different technology. The enemies could not adapt fast enough. Kate, how are our special packages holding up? All charges are still active and ready for deployment. But Ryan, we're taking heavy damage. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. The Vanguard's armor was cracked in bleeding atmosphere. Half its weapons were offline. But it was still moving, still fighting. Like all human ships, it was built to take punishment and keep working. Deep inside the central hub, Captain Greg Nelson felt the explosions from the battle outside. His charges were still in place, waiting for the signal to detonate. But first, the assault fleet had to get close enough to evacuate the stealth ships. Admiral Richards, this is Nelson. How much longer can you wait? Tony Richards' voice crackled over the radio from his hiding place among the asteroids. The Ravagers are getting close to finding us. Whatever you're going to do, do it soon. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Captain Cooper's damaged ship, leaking air and barely functional, crashed through the Ravager defensive line and reached the hub surface. But instead of trying to escape, he did something no one expected. All ships, this is Cooper. I'm going to ram the hubs. Main sensor array. When I do, their coordination is going to break down for a few minutes. Use that time to get our people out. Cooper, no. Morrison's voice filled the radio. There has to be another way. There isn't time, Admiral. Tell Kate her weapons worked perfectly. Tell Earth that the Vanguard did its job. The ship's impact with the sensor array created a massive explosion that lit up space for thousands of miles. The hub's ability to coordinate its defenses was temporarily destroyed. In the confusion that followed, the stealth fleet broke from cover and began their escape, but the sacrifice had cost them their best chance to destroy the hub quietly. Now the Ravagers knew exactly where the charges were hidden. Mechanical repair crews were already working to disarm them. All ships, emergency acceleration toward the hub, Morrison ordered. We have to detonate those charges before they can be removed. The Federation fleet charged toward the massive structure. Ravager ships swarmed around them like angry insects. The battle became a race. Could the humans reach the detonation point before the explosives were disabled? That was when the Ravager Prime emerged from the hub's core. The entity was enormous, larger than any ship ever built. It looked like a mechanical god, made of dark metal and pulsing lights. As it rose from the hub's surface, smaller Ravager ships began moving in perfect coordination again. "What is that thing?" Turner asked in horror. "That's their central intelligence," Morrison realized. "It's been controlling all the other Ravagers. If we can destroy it, ... The Prime's weapons began firing. Each shot could destroy a cruiser with a single hit. The Federation fleet started taking massive casualties. Ships that had survived dozens of battles were vaporized in seconds. But Jake Morrison had learned something important during his months of fighting the Ravager. Big targets were easier to hit than small ones. Advanced weapons were more complex than simple ones. And sometimes the oldest tricks worked better than the newest technology. All human ships concentrate fire on the Prime. Everything we have. Right at its central core, hundreds of human vessels opened fire at once. Their weapons were crude and primitive compared to alien technology, but there were so many of them, firing so many different types of projectiles, that even the Prime could not adapt fast enough. The massive entity staggered under the assault. Its perfect coordination began to break down. For the first time since the war began, a Ravager force was losing its ability to adapt. That was when Captain Nelson detonated his charges. The explosions started small, but they quickly spread throughout the hub's structure. The power core that fed the Prime began to overload. Energy cascaded through systems that had been designed to last forever. The Prime's scream filled space, across multiple frequencies. It was the death cry of an intelligence that had ruled 1,000 worlds. But it was also something else. It was the sound of minds that had been trapped in mechanical bodies for centuries, finally being set free. As the hub collapsed, something unexpected happened. The Ravager ships throughout the galaxy stopped fighting. They did not explode or self-destruct. They simply powered down and became silent. "Admiral Morrison, this is Captain Torres, on the outer patrol. All Ravager activity has ceased. There. Just ... floating there." Morrison stared at the expanding explosion where the central hub had been. The Prime was gone. Its massive body was breaking apart and falling into the gravitational well of a nearby star. "All ships, cease fire. Monitor the Ravager vessels, but do not attack unless attacked." In the silence that followed, Admiral Tony Richards broadcast a message from one of the powered-down Ravager ships his Marines had boarded. "Admiral, you need to hear this. The Ravagers are trying to communicate." The voice that came over the radio was weak and distorted, but it was definitely organic. "Please, ... help us ... We remember now. We were not always machines. We chose this to escape death, but we became slaves instead. The Prime controlled us ... made us consume, made us forget who we were." Morrison felt a chill run through his body. The Ravagers had not been evil machines. They had been people who made a terrible choice and lost control of their destiny. "Can you shut down your ships? Can you stop the war?" "Yes, ... We choose to stop. We choose to sleep. We have done enough harm ... Thank you for freeing us from the Prime's control." One by one, across the galaxy, Ravager ships began shutting down their systems. Some self-destructed to prevent their technology from being misused. Others simply went dark and drifted in space, like monuments to a civilization that had lost its way. The war was over. President Rodriguez received the news while standing in the Rose Garden. Around the world, humans looked up at the stars and knew they were safe. But more than that, they knew they had earned their place in the galaxy. Admiral Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the alien ships of the Federation fleet. They were damaged and scarred from battle, but they were flying in formation with human vessels. The pretty ships and the ugly ships together, united by their shared victory. "Sir," Commander Turner said, "we're receiving congratulations from every world. In the Federation. They're calling us the saviors of the galaxy. Morrison nodded, but he was thinking about something else. The galaxy was silent now, not because it was empty, but because the noise of war had finally stopped. In that silence, there was room for new voices, new ideas, new friendships between species that had once been strangers. Set course for Earth. Alex, I think it's time to go home. As the human fleet began its journey back to Earth, other ships joined them. Zeltharian crystal vessels flew alongside human metal boxes. Vorthon phase ships flickered in and out of formation with human cruisers. The species that had once laughed at human ships now copied their designs and tactics. The laughter had stopped. In its place was something better. Respect earned through courage, sacrifice, and the simple human refusal to give up when others said it was hopeless. The galaxy was silent, but it was a good silence. It was the silence of peace, of safety, of a future where ugly ships and pretty ships could work together to protect what mattered most. In that silence, humanity had finally found its voice.